Welcome everybody for the second part of the program. For those of you who are new, just a short introduction, as short as can be. Rotterdam's doing great. The city is growing. There's lots of investments in moving forward on the quality of housing, on big urban area developments, on densifying the city, on increasing the quality of public space. So you might say Rotterdam is doing a good job. But we feel that everybody should be a part of that movement. And this is a very difficult task. It's a big challenge to make sure that everybody that lives in this city is also a part of its future and also a part of the process of shaping its future. I think this is the essence of our City Makers program. And what I mean by ours, the Rotterdam Architecture Institute. I work there as director together with my colleague Barbara. And well, really to move forward on this notion, we asked Tony Griffin to join us last year and to share with us her views and her research on what she called the just city. And I'm not going to take away anything from Tony, so I just summarize in my own words that a just city at least should be a city which involves everybody in shaping its future. So we asked her to share with us her research into that and to really build on that ourselves by organizing a masterclass with students and testing really the tools perhaps also we could use to shape this just city. We organized the masterclass, actually it was initiated by Field Academy, our partner, and together with several partners as well, Amy Opzuid, the Rotterdam Expertise Center for Social Innovation from the Rotterdam High School. They had a talk downstairs during lunch. And Lokaal, Lisbeth's here, really a center for democracy and dialogue, really, to summarize. And this week we tried really to learn how to make use of the knowledge Tony and her team are building in New York. And we're wrapping it up with a 2-day program. Well, we had several programs during all week, but we're wrapping up with a two-day program, and this is the final part. So it's in two pieces. The first piece is a talk show hosted by Chris Lutt, who's beside me. And we thought it would be our worthwhile to say, well, if we are a very diverse city, and we're proud to be so, over 170 nationalities, and we are trying to build a just city, then how might we express that in our architecture, in our urban design, and in our public art? So we've asked Arne Makic, who was the last year's Maaskant Prize winner, to share with us her views on this question. And also we talked with her and asked who might we invite then. So Gregory Gravenbeek, who's next to her, will join her in the seats here. And he's from the South, and he created this beautiful movie. And this was actually our incentive to select more movies and to build this talk surrounding several illustrative clips. And those were selected by AVFR, by Christina Ampatsiu. And so she will join us as well. And we'll move through the talk searching for ways we might express stories from the South into architecture and urban design. So, a complex and long introduction to some very nice guests, and I'm very happy that they're here. So finally, Hisham Khalidi, partner of Christina in Sculpture International, working on the first triennale here in the South, and searching for perhaps more or less the same question. So it's the 5 of you, I guess, searching with us to answer it and search for ways to express community and identity. So I think that's the final words I'm going to say, Chris, and please take it from here.
Thank you, Bas. Yes. Your introduction overlaps slightly with what I had prepared, but I don't think that's a problem necessarily. Welcome all to this talk show about expressing community through design. We have about 3/4 of an hour together to briefly explore, as Bas already told you, with the several guests, what this might mean in general and especially for Rotterdam. My name again is Chris Lut. I used to be an architect and I became a curator, and now I'm a moderator and a teacher, and I'm heavily involved in architecture and urban transformation, and I'm happy to be the moderator for this next 3/4 of an hour. We have a really interesting program with a couple of distinguished speakers, as Bas already mentioned, two of which are curators for the first Rotterdam Triennale, which is part of Sculpture International Rotterdam. Apart from them, we have clips from the Architecture Film Festival and a Rotterdam-grown, homegrown filmmaker. So please let me allow to call the participants on stage. To start with, a co-founder of a distinguished architecture practice from Amsterdam called Studio LA, which, according to the Maaskamp Prize for Young Architects 2017, which they won, are rewarded for their quest for inclusive architecture and new forms of public domain. They wrote several books about that and are co-curator for the first Rotterdam Triennale. Please welcome to the stage Arna Makic. Secondly, we have a PhD student who is also a co-founder of a platform for architecture called Amateur Cities and a programmer for the Architecture Film Festival Rotterdam. Please welcome Cristina Apancido. Thirdly, the chief curator of the first Triennale, who was raised in Holland, lives in Belgium and works in Paris. Please welcome Hisham. Khalidi, I'm sorry, I forgot. And finally, our homegrown filmmaker who has personal experience with youth crime, and he has been bettering his life since by informing the public about youth crime, and he did so in part by producing a film called De Druk, or The Pressure in Dutch. Please welcome Redzery Gravenbeek. Well, now we've got that over, we can start with the conversation. Very welcome here. It's really nice to have you and be part of this. We have a lot to talk about in a brief period of time, and we will see various clips of about 1 to 3 minutes on average. Expression of community or representation is a topic that has been in the media for many years, but in the last years more and more. And we see it mainly, I guess, in terms of representation of board members, of women in companies. We see it in films. Are there enough people that show the diversity of our society on TV, etc.? But this conference, this workshop, is about the just city. So Arna, could you please tell us briefly in your own words why it is important to express community in a just city?
Well, I think it's important that people can identify with the place they live in. So if you take in all these opinions and stories of people living, then then you have different representatives within a city and by building a city. So I think it's really important to have that also as a design method.
Identification is important.
I think, identification is really important. Yeah, that you can recognize yourself and that you feel at home in a place.
Identification and feeling at home. I'm writing things down because I see this a little bit as a research, this conversation. I hope it is. It might be a bit pretentious, but I'm trying to make it into that. Identification and feeling at home. So what's at stake? What happens if this doesn't work out?
Well, if you do not feel at home, then you also feel like you're not part of a place. You feel like you cannot express your opinion, that you're not taken seriously. So I think, really, personal feelings of inhabitants are at stake, and that are not taken serious enough.
So there's a direct relationship between personal feelings and public expressions.
Yes,
Okay.
I believe so. Yeah, but I think especially recognizing yourself in a place that the kind of the stories that you the stories of yourself, that you can see it in the environment around you, and that's expressed in public space, but also in buildings, in architecture, and all the systems around you actually.
So it's both that you can identify with your city, but it's perhaps also that other people can identify you within the city.
Yeah, that the city reflects its inhabitants, and vice versa.
Is that often the case, you think, that cities reflect their inhabitants?
I think that's one of our biggest challenges.
One of our biggest challenges.
Yeah.
Okay.
Yeah.
Well, the challenge of actually expressing community is maybe most vivid in situations where there has been a huge disaster, be it a natural disaster or a war. And maybe that's the easiest way to start this conversation, to show what might be at stake and how you might deal with a situation like
Yes.
that. For that, I would like to ask you, Christina, to introduce our first film clip.
Great, thanks a lot, Chris. So just to, as a sort of a starting point, all the clips that have been selected today, they deal with this idea of how architecture can reflect community in very different ways. So the first clip is showing how basically a community can be consolidated through time around a certain piece of architecture that functions as a landmark for the community and both for the city that hosts this place, and how the destruction of such a monument can have a very deep impact and can really affect the community that surrounds it. It's a clip from the film The Destruction of Memory, and it's about the Mostar Bridge. So maybe we can have the clip.
Vi na jednoj strani u ratu čujete eksplozije. Svuda je taj miris smrti oko vas, provodi granate, razrušene kuće, sve. I jedini izlaz, meni se čini da je sasvim ispravan i onako koji su i moje kolege mnogi radili, to je da smo nešto radili. Kakva je njegova djelatnost? Književnici su najbolje pisali djela u ratu i najbolje su djela iz rata. Inspirativno djeluju. Iz sebe je nekako polučio najvrednije stvari, najhumanije stvari i najbolje se na taj način mogao iskazati.
When I remember what is no longer there, I feel a spasm in my stomach, a knot in my throat. I feel death lurking in its absence. I've heard that the people of Mostar, even adults, cried when they saw that the bridge had fallen. We expect people to die. We count on our own lives to end. The destruction of a monument to civilization is something else. The bridge, in all its beauty and grace, was built to outlive us. It was an attempt to grasp eternity. Because it was the product of both individual creativity and collective experience, it transcended our individual destiny. The bridge is all of us, forever.
Well, a very touching clip, I think. Arna, you are from Bosnia-Herzegovina originally, and you've done a lot of research about monuments which have been destroyed in relating to the war in Bosnia in the early 90s. And you've also written 2 books called Mortal Cities and Forgotten Monuments, Parts 1 and 2. And especially the first one relates about monuments also from the 60s and 70s for the people who fell in the Second World War. And that resulted in a project, a final project of you called The Jump, which is kind of a proposal to deal with this problem that was created in the destruction of the bridge. So Could you tell us something about that project and how you approached that? And
Yes.
you also brought some slides.
Yeah, I brought some slides because it's easier and an image is much more powerful sometimes than words. My family is from this city, and I'm born also there. And what is important to know is that a lot of people that lived in that city really identified with this bridge, because the Mostad also means bridge keeper. The whole city has been developed around this bridge, so the city is the bridge and the bridge is the city, actually. So like the movie says, when it was destroyed, everyone thought, okay, everything can happen during the war, but let them please not destroy the bridge. And it happened. And of course, this is not something that is that now. This is a real situation. So I think we should always keep that in mind. That this is happening at a lot of places. And how my research started actually was that as a kid I was drawing the bridge a lot of times because it reminded me of home, and it gave me a sense of I identified with it, because I didn't feel like I could identify with my environment in the Netherlands, because this was the environment I grew up in most of my life. And and my parents were telling me all the time, like, and also when we went back to Bosnia for the first time, and 70% of Mostar was destroyed, 70%. And they brought me to places and they said, this is your heritage, but it was all destroyed. And at the same time, I was living in this place where I kind of felt like, oh, but there are no points of reference to history or to identity, or there were to identity, but not to history or not to Dutch history. I didn't have any reference points to that. So that was a bit my starting point for research. What does identity mean in relation to architecture? So that's what I started researching. How was architecture used in former Yugoslavia in shaping collective identity in different turning points in history? So after the country Yugoslavia was formed, the government decided to build many monuments that would commemorate the Second World War, but these monuments were they were not allowed to have any symbolism of religion or of nationalism, of political ideas, so they were abstract shapes. And I tried to learn from that also. And then what you see now, after the destruction, the bridge is rebuilt, but actually if you walk 50 meters into one direction or 50 meters in the other direction, you come into a divided city where it does matter what your name is and what your religious background is. And so this is kind of a fake connection. It became a division of the city instead of a connection. And so that's what I started researching. And how is architecture, and also in this bridge, I really feel like all these different layers of history are important. So rebuilding it, but not talking about this destruction, is for me a very weird thing. So that this layer is not incorporated. So I started researching how is architecture used now in public space. So what you see, a lot of street names are renamed in old kind of fascist names from the Second World War, and a lot of political statues are placed, and it's very devastating to see. This is the division of the city now. So the one part is mostly Muslim people living, and the other part mostly Catholic people.
It's more segregated than it used to be now?
It was before the war. It was never segregated, and now it's people, like children, go to different schools, and they are being taught a different history, different history books. So I started researching that, and this is one of the monuments also there, which you see old fascist signs, and that's really, and this was like last year. So what I wanted to do is look at what what kind of are there certain traditions or rituals that we can use in designing public space, and where it does not matter where you're from or what your name is or what your religious background is or if you're a man or a woman. And that is, of course, this diving off of the old bridge. So even when the bridge was destroyed, one of the first things they did was build a diving board so that people could express themselves by jumping off, because this is really a ritual that belongs to the city from the moment that it started existing. So these are examples of men that dive and practice every day. And there's an annual competition where it does not matter if you're Catholic, Muslim, Orthodox, everyone jumps. So I designed a monument, a jumping monument, where people can learn how to jump step by step. So every 50 centimeters they can, they could make a new step. But of course, this is quite a kind of radical design. It's quite big, but I wanted to use it as an image to have a dialogue with the city about it. So that last few months we also had that there. So we have been giving workshops to kids in diving. So one of the main, the guy you see in the left, that's Lorenz Listo. He's one of the best divers of the city, and he's giving workshops to kids to learn how to dive and to give this ritual to a new generation. Also talk about the meaning of diving, what it means for the city. And this is just in the local bathhouse. So that's what we try to do, really use this design as a way to give people new ideas and to go into dialogue with people to see if this idea really fits their needs. Yeah.
Wow. Well, it's very beautiful research, and it shows clearly that you see a role as going way beyond merely designing a space. Because the space had already been redesigned and reconstructed, and you saw that it was still failing. So you dived into, if you permit me that word, ritual and performance in a sense. So design is creating performances to express community, which seems very believable to me, although I've never been there. And it becomes very clear what you mean with just. And because this is not an inclusive situation, such as segregation. So many of my questions have already been answered.
Yeah.
And what keep coming back is to identify with and the collective. These both, and feeling at home. I think we'll probably see them in the next clips as well, because I think this is a good moment in which we saw the need for expression of community and maybe in a very extreme circumstances. Now Rotterdam and other places in the world are a bit less extreme, fortunately. But this could be a good moment, Christina, maybe to go all the way down to Australia.
Yes, and to the second, combine two clips actually that talk about the creation of a mosque in Newport, Australia. Which basically shows like how the building of a mosque, of a place that is kind of like meant to house a very specific and a lot of times like a closed community, it actually becomes a symbol of openness and invitation. And it was a brief that basically asked for this building to become a reference point for the Australian Muslims, and also to open up their community to the rest and to establish it in Australia as a. So they commissioned Glenn Murcutt, an architect that was mainly involved with housing projects, and this was his major public building commission. So it's two short clips that talk about how this building kind of embodies the Muslim community of Newport.
The Islamic Society of Newport. They had this grand vision of wanting to have their ideas and their ideals of being in modern Australia, tolerance, acceptance, multiculturalism. They said they would like a building that is representative of themselves as a community.
Glenn has given us a design, it's absolutely heart-melting. It's one of the most beautiful things I've ever seen. The first time people seen the project, seen the lanterns and all the different colours and that, they said this is one of the most spiritual places that we've ever been in.
You will see the faces of the community in this mosque. It's like our dream is done now. So it's really a miracle.
It was amazing. Everyone is excited, everyone is happy. We just couldn't think that this day will eventually come. It's been a long way, but we're all happy that we made it.
What we've been able to do with the help of Glenn is bring these walls down that barricade us from the non-Muslim community, inviting them in. There's going to be an Islamic library there. People can read up about Islam, they can ask questions, the Imam is going to be there, we're going to have tours. Let the people know that we are Australian Muslims and we're here to stay because we are Australian.
The walls are beautiful and I think they sing. I can't count how many times that I've just gone there day after day and stand at the front and look up at the ceiling and look at the walls and I just melt. Not every day do you get an opportunity to build a project that's going to be there for a very long time, be spoken about so often around the world for hundreds and hundreds of years to come. I think Glenn has given us such a beautiful gift.
Arna, very different situation here. No destruction, at least not in the way as in Mostar, for example. And this is more about expressing a community which is relatively new in Australia, maybe the last half a century. Can you relate that to your own research?
Yes, of course, in a way. I think it's really about getting to know a community and really trying to see what their needs are. And I think that this clip shows that it is really very much succeeded there. So.
How does it show for you that they succeeded in that?
Well, you hear people that use it talking and they're really positive about it. But of course, I haven't been there, so I don't know that. But what I noticed in Mostad, for example, I was there, of course, to show my idea. And what I noticed there, that so many NGOs have been there, that people really became so skeptical about it, of people coming with their ideas and saying, oh, I have the best idea for you, for your community. And I think that's really, there's a danger, but also really a big challenge for designers in, do you really take responsibility? Do you really care for that certain community? Do you really want to connect? And I think that's, for me, that's really important, also the integrity in the way you work. Yeah.
So you have used design in a way to create discussion and to maybe invent or reinvent performances and rituals. Here the architect really made a design, which is very distinct. I mean, there are mosques in the world which are rectangular, have no minarets and no domes. In Iran and Saudi Arabia, there are a few examples from the 70s, for example. But it's quite remarkable that a new community creates a design which is visually unrelated to where perhaps they came from. So does that say something to you? Does that mean something to you, that the design maybe tries to find new ways of expressing?
Yeah, I think so, because of course it's a new time now. So maybe there's also need for a new type of design. So I think if you go into dialogue with a community, that certain types of designs could also develop.
So what is the role of tradition there? Because are you ambiguous towards tradition?
No, I think in a way, in my own practice. So what I did in Mostad was that this tradition is really important, but the shape of the design should of course fit that. But my intention was not to design a new bridge. My intention was to design something that could help this tradition going. And what I saw was that people that live there, they liked the design, but they were also like, yeah, but of course it's too expensive. Are we really going to pay for that? Because there's so much unemployment, and so now we're going to build this, but there are a lot of people without work. So there were a lot of questions. So what we decided then was to organize these workshops and just for people to feel how. What the intention of the design is. And after this, we're going to see, okay, maybe the design is going to change, or it's going to be much smaller, or it's going to be completely different. I don't know. But for me, this design was a step in between. And not the idea is not to build it exactly like it is. And I think that's the same with identification. It always, your identity is so layered and it always changes constantly. And for me, a design should in a way also be the same, that you're not stuck with your design and how it's supposed to be for a certain community, but that you really try to develop it. And of course, as an architect, you have the tools to make that image, but then you also have to let that image go and then go into dialogue with people to make it fit them.
So you stress that it's important not just to give your ideas to a community, and then there might be some skeptical NGOs looking around, checking on you, but to really know the needs of communities and really care for them. And you're implicitly saying there's a difference between the design as a process and the design as an end product. And you're stressing the process, which I think is a nice bridge, Christina, to the third series of clips, the process.
Yes, so the third clip comes from the movie Do More with Less, and it's looking at a post-earthquake in Ecuador. There was this big earthquake 2 years ago, so it's one particular project that looks at how the community basically came together in this very urgent situation to create a common space. So it was a way not only of a relief of a very practical need of actually having this shared kitchen space, but also how the building itself functioned as a way to bring this to bring these people together. So.
El 16 de abril a las 11 de la noche nosotros llegamos aquí a ese espacio. Llegamos 59 familias. Llegamos, no teníamos plásticos. Y como llovía, brisaba, nos mojábamos. Tuvimos sábado en la noche, domingo, el lunes ya la gente empezó a ayudar. Y llegaron unos chicos de Quito, los chicos de Actuemos Ecuador, con propuestas. De los arquitectos sabía que, hacían construcciones, pero jamás en la vida había conocido a un arquitecto. No sabía qué hacía, cómo trabajaban. He hablado con aquí la mayoría, los chicos, las señoras y los señores, los jóvenes, nadie conocen arquitectos. Y cuando llegaron los arquitectos aquí, arquitectos.
La arquitectura en sí no existe en estas comunidades. O sea, eres ingeniero, el que sabe construir, pero el diseño no está contemplado en ningún punto. O sea, no piensas en diseño, no piensas en arquitectura, sino en construcción.
Pusieron y nosotros dijimos, bueno, una casa comunal está bien, porque en sí estábamos en un espacio donde había cocina que era en la tierra, no teníamos piso, estábamos muy incómodos.
Se organizaban súper bien, tenían un líder de construcción que era maestro en otras obras, entonces el man sabía un montón. Se llama Fabián, él es el que hizo todo básicamente. O sea, este man sabía mucho más del trabajo con caña que cualquiera. O sea, lo interesante era que había el conocimiento, pero no se estaba explotando. Entonces esta gente podía trabajar mucho mejor en caña que en hormigón.
Fabián, nosotros aprendimos en papel. Queremos que ustedes nos ayuden. Bueno, si están de acuerdo, le dije, a cambiar, a intercambiar conocimientos de lo que ustedes saben y de lo que yo sé, con gusto. Pero fue la humildad lo que me hizo trabajar con ellos y hicimos una gran amistad. Y trabajo lo mismo. Trabajo en equipo, se logró eso.
Well, this film, I think, is very supportive of your claim that it's important to really know and care about people's needs, because these architects from Quito discovered that there was knowledge about working with bamboo, but this knowledge was not being used. And they actually asked somebody living there to apply this knowledge and learned actually about constructing with bamboo as architects who had trained in universities, presumably. So that's, I think, a nice confirmation. But with what we have reached so far in this conversation is that identification and feeling at home is vital. And the role of a designer should, let's say, care and understand for communities' needs. And that it's important to go beyond the surface of merely constructions, but seeing how places are actually really being used. Well, with that in mind, Isham, I think it's time in the conversation to go towards Rotterdam. Now, you are the curator of the first Triennale as part of Sculpture International, and you asked Arna to collaborate with you. And Loreen, of course. I have not mentioned Loreen, Arna's partner, who couldn't be here today due to being sick. And you also have a third co-curator, whose name I don't know.
Karima Boudou.
Karima Boudou. Yes. So you have a whole team. Do you subscribe to the lessons we've learned so far in this conversation, and does that relate to how you're trying to approach this?
Sure. Yeah, I do definitely relate. I mean, that's one of the reasons I wanted to work with Arna and Loreen. I think as curators, we're kind of divided into groups. Like Arna and Loreen are really invested in the city itself and the inhabitants, whilst I try with myself and Karima to sort of defend the other side, the arts, the fine arts, and to sort of. But looking at what you just showed us, I mean, you really go into the side of fine arts, you know, especially with this kind of performative situation with the diver, and that's really interesting, where sort of artistic research or architectural research then just shifts into something performative, and this is what we're searching for, so to sort of get a wide spectrum of possibilities that you can have, or tools that you can use for working within a city. And you know, the Triennale is about art in the public space, and we try to emphasize the idea of the public. But not only through, let's say, well, architecture is a form of that. You know, you could use architecture for that. But you know, it's also, yeah, I don't know. I think it's most also important to sort of look at not so much the needs of people or how you can accommodate needs, but also how to intervene in another way. Maybe to distort situations as well. So it's not so functional as architecture in that sense. But you know, there's a lot of mixing going on, because you go far into that. I see other architectural groups, you know, like Atelier Bauau or, you know, Ram Labor, and, you know, they also do that, and that's interesting. But then there's also like the fine arts side, which is, yeah, as an example, I always, you know, go back to somebody like Christoph Buchel, you know. I mean, you showed a mosque here, you know, I could put next to that the project that he did for Venice Biennale, where he actually dedicated a church, because there is no mosque in Venice, and he dedicated a church for the Icelandic pavilion. He's an Icelandic artist. He changed it into a mosque, and then had sort of a space for people, for the visitors of the Biennale, to actually see people pray, you know? So that's a bit of a weird situation, and, you know, it's... So he did that with the community, and similar with what we've seen with Glenn Murcutt, where he looks at the needs of people. Christoph does the same thing actually, but might not be interested in sort of an end result, but just anticipates on what this could be, like what it generates of a dialogue when you set up a construction like that. Basically, there is no mosque in Venice. We know that Italy has sort of a political situation where they deal with migrants, they deal with Islam as a, you know, Italy is becoming more populist, nationalist, you know, and then to sort of change this church into a mosque, which has been done in history, you know, many times, you know, the church has been exactly, yeah. Or in Istanbul, you know, the Hagia Sophia, that was a church. Yeah, so he was sort of interested by changing that into a mosque, and then also changing that into sort of a theatrical space, because allowing visitors to see people pray, you enter a fictional space, right? So it becomes like a theater play, and so what he anticipates then on is sort of a double situation where you enter fictional space through reality, or reality through fictional space. So he oscillates between the two. And that's interesting. So that's from a fine arts perspective. So I think that we're trying somewhere to look at that whole spectrum, to sort of see where one can intervene within a city, together with people, from maybe the needs of people, from what a city is, or what a city can be. And we have different tools to do that, and we sort of investigate that. So, yeah.
Okay, so that seems you're a good match with Arna and Loreen, with their architectural background and your more fine arts background. What you said made me think of the first clip we saw of Mostar, because you're talking about distortion, and you're talking about fictional space that you enter through reality. But what the poem that we heard in that clip, the author, or one of the authors, said that some of the writers actually wrote their best work during the war, after the destruction of the bridge. Well, I'm not going to say we should promote destruction of bridges to create great literature, but this does seem to relate a bit to your notion of distortion. So there might be weirdly almost positive sides to destruction, or am I taking it a bit too far? Am I stretching your notion?
Yeah, but not so much positive sides. Distortion or construction, let's say deconstruction and construction are parts of the same thing. Basically, you know, things change. And they change by either political situation, political will, by actors. You know, inhabitants are actors, citizens are actors. So, for instance, a way to go about this is to think citizens as participants, or participants as part of a work, for instance, you know, where citizens become sort of, actors. And you know, in the Greek agora, that was a normal thing, that you would have sort of a political play or a political display where the inhabitants had a chance through a dramatization of situations to talk to the politics. That's what they did sort of in the ancient agoras. And they would have these agoras everywhere. So I think, yeah, that's I think what you because that's what I found really interested in your work when it comes to the destruction. I don't see sort of there's no spectacle of destruction there. There's something else going on. There is transformation, and you tap into that transformation in a very good way. So I guess it deals more with that, and also responsibility. I mean, there's destruction. There's the other side of destruction, which is construction. There's also responsibility of what you construct within a space. I mean, I was discussing it with Nicole van Dijk just now, the museum, you know, the curator of Museum Rotterdam, and she's a curator, and so she approaches space also from a programmatic way. So when you start doing a triennale, or when you make an exhibition for a museum, for instance, what you do is you approach space in a programmatic way. So you can't just construct something like a mosque or a building or whatever. You also have to construct a program with that, like curate it, for instance. And that's what I think also maybe could be a next step in city development, where sort of social sciences are meeting architecture, and where design sort of is expanding itself into all sorts of different fields. And it's touching humanities, it's touching other...
Okay.
But that's what I think. I'm thinking out loud now.
Maybe you don't have enough tools yet with only 2 architects with you, and maybe you need a sociologist. But it's already past now, so we're kind of in overtime.
Yeah.
So I just wanted to quickly make a little bridge to the next, to the last speaker in this panel. The words Reggery, the words distortion, destruction, transformation. I don't want to stereotype you here, but perhaps in some way that relates, to your personal history. Arna, could you tell us why you wanted to have Reggery on the panel?
Well, like Hisham said, Lorien and I did a big research in Rotterdam South, where we tried to actually see or research existing qualities, initiatives, feelings, representatives of different groups, and at a certain point, via, we came to Reggery because a lot of different people were saying you have to talk to Reggery and you have to see his movie. So we did, and we actually had a really nice talk at Zuidplein. Besides that, Reggery made a very important movie, and also now is informing a lot of people about the problematics that are shown in his movie. I think it also shows that I believe there's a big disconnection between what is happening on the ground and policy. And so getting to know, as a policymaker, for example, all these qualities and initiatives that are important, and giving them a stage and actually kind of enforcing them, I think that is really important. And that's also why I hope that every policymaker will see Reggery's movie and also will take his initiative and actually bring it, give him space to bring it to a next level. And that's why I thought it was really important.
So Reggery, there's I think a 50, or how long is the film? How many minutes?
55.
55 minutes. A film that you've been showing in schools and other places to discuss, your own experiences. And we have a little clip of about 2-3 minutes of that, I think, of the first. Is there something you would like to say to introduce it, or shall we just watch it and then you say something about it afterwards?
Afterwards.
Afterwards. Thank you. Let's go.
Maar waar moet je handen gebruiken dan? Je hebt toch je benen, of niet? Keel, doe niet als een pony, man.
Bro, maakt niet uit, man. Ben geen liedje, man.
Hé, Keel, je hebt het zelf ook gevraagd, man.
Leg die ding, je gaat toch missen. Schiet gelijk, je gaat gelijk missen.
Maar ik heb dit, man.
Lijkt het niet af, man. Je gaat toch missen, schiet het.
Wat zei je? Wat zei je? Oké. Zie je, schatje? Power.
Praatjes heeft hij gehad, man. Fuck off met hem, man. Je moet niet zoveel praten, jij.
Check out je bek, man. Anders ga je problemen krijgen.
Ja, tegen meisje kan je wel, hè?
Normaal klap ik geen meisje, maar wel ga uitzondering maken.
Doe dan, doe dan.
Check it, fuck off, man. Vraag me aan. Nog één keer. Kom dan. Kijk,
Ik heb bord voor jou. Je moet tegen die mattie van je zeggen dat ze bek dicht moet houden.
Check out je bek, dan ga je echt klappen.
Moet de hele fucking dag op je wachten of zo.
Je bent nu klaar, toch? Is oké, toch?
Ja, is niks.
Nou, klaar dan.
Ga spelen, jongen.
Nou, maar kom met mij play dan. Kom play, je
doe
doet niks, man.
Nee, doe je ding, doe je ding.
Met mij joinen? Ja?
Boertje. Fuck off, man. Ja, donder op. Speel dan.
Wat was dat net?
Niks.
Zo niks.
Well, Redgery, we see people hanging out in public space and a community there. And the title, The Druk or The Pressure, would seem to be very aptly chosen for this, what we just saw. Now, since the film is partially based on your own life experiences, I assume you feel represented and expressed by this film. Why is that important? And yeah.
Excuse me for my English. My English is not so good as them. As you can see, the movie starts at the square. And when I was younger, we always called the neighborhood Concrete Jungle. Because there were only buildings and there were no hangouts for us. We only had the square. And a lot of people think that the square is a good place because you can play basketball and football. But they didn't seem to understand that it's also a dangerous place. Because if you only have one place where everybody comes, not only good people come there, also the criminals and people with bad intentions. And as a youngster, you look up to those kind of people. And I was one of those youngsters. When I was at the square playing football, I was looking up to the older guys who came there with cars and the jewelry, and they influenced me. And that's where my criminal career started. And that's what I want to show people, that because there was a lack of, hoe zeg je dat, buurthuizen en zo.
Community centers.
Yeah, that if there's only a square in the neighborhood, it's also a dangerous place. And I want to make people aware of that. And that's what we do. By showing the movie at instanties.
Yeah, all sorts of organizations.
Organizations and schools, to show them that there's two sides of the story at the square.
The square. There's two sides to the story at the square. That's a very beautiful sentence. Awareness you want to create, and through representation. First of all, I think it's brave of you to make that film, and I think I can see why that's important to you and also to the larger community. I wonder, how do you collaborate, or how does this fit into the Triennale? What does this mean for you as curators, as designers, to have Redgery's story amongst other stories as well from Rotterdam? As a final question.
Yeah, what we do now is that we collect all sorts of stories, so Redgery's, but also a lot of different ones. And the artists that are going to work on the Triennale, from all sorts of artistic disciplines and backgrounds, and local and international, that they work from out of these stories and from out of these local qualities and stories, instead of that they come as artists and just put their artworks that they have shown in different other locations, so that to make it really location specific, and of course for exchange to happen between Redgery and other artists.
Location specificity.
Yeah, exactly. So maybe I can add to that. one of the things that we are investigating is sort of this idea of locality, which we kind of call interlocality. I mean, this is a term that we made up, which means between locals. How can one compare, and how can one, put them together, or so that, in that sense. So when you do a Trinale, which is a 3-month period, you have a sort of a festival going on in the city for 3 months, and you have artists that come and do research. It's very difficult for an artist or an architect to get into a city in such a short period of time and to understand the city. So we kind of do the pre-research for that, so they have an idea. But they don't have to work with that information. I mean, they would have your story, but they wouldn't have to. They can tap into that, or they can take from it, or they can get a sort of a feeling of it. It's more like that. And then the second thing is the interaction that you have with all of the people that we've been speaking, or that we have spoken. The interaction between them and the artists and the people that we invite to come here and do things. Also the local artists create sort of a narrative, or a dialogue or conversation about the city, of what the city can be or should be, or if you say like something that you pointed out correctly, is this thing of the 2 sides of a square. That's beautiful. So you take that, like this poetic sort of thing that has sort of a ground in. It's So I think in that way, the same way you use for the Just City, the stories of other people, or I think it's the same, no?
Well, it's a very beautiful notion, I think, of the interlocality between locals. Yeah. And I think this is a very nice moment maybe to finish the conversation, which I would summarize in a sense as, first of all, there's 2 sides to the bridge. And even when the bridge is reconstructed, there's even more 2 sides. And we end up, there's 2 sides to the square. But there's a solution, and that is the interlocality between locals.
Exactly. Yeah, beautiful.
Thank you very much. Thank you. Wil jij nog wat zeggen?
So thank you all. And I know Arne has to go and finish someone else's study. So just wrap it up quickly and then go straight to Tony to finish up the masterclass, which has been going on for a week. And everybody is really hanging on by their teeth, I guess. So I think we should wrap that up correctly and then go for some drinks and celebrate the weekend. So everybody, thank you very much. We wanted to explore the notion that we might even design new ways of expressing our local community. And we are doing so by exploring all these Rotterdam places and finding out new ways to go about and look at them. This was shared this morning, and we'll reflect on that with Tony in a few minutes. And now we did it by crossing the seas and learning from other places, thanks to the AFFR. So, and we hope to tie it down to Rotterdam in our next City Makers Conference in the fall, in November. So, thank you very much. And you want to say something, Chris? You have a microphone, so just go ahead.
Thank you very much. I made a terrible mistake. I just realized I really, well, she's still laughing, but she could be really angry deep down, because we're running about 10 minutes late. I completely forgot the last clip. So maybe we cannot show it, but I can just mention, or it's here, but I don't know, do we still have time for a 1-minute clip?
You can shut me up by showing the last clip, and I think it's the last clip, right? Yeah. Which is an invitation for everybody to join the AFFR tonight. Tonight,
you want to say tonight at the AFFR?
At the Industry Gebouw, we are celebrating the Midsummer Night, so the longest day of the year, with an evening screening of Molman. So it's a very happy invitation to our festival in October. And there is a small teaser that actually shows that the total opposite of a community is like the architecture for architecture's sake, but in a very, very twisted way. So it's the last clip.
I don't live in a red brick house now. It's Mum's house. I built a house in the back. That's where I live now. I built a lot of buildings behind Mum's house. I have 25 buildings and 23 solos. I've been building back here since 1965. That would be 50 years. I don't use nails no more than nothing.
Okay.